Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Shazam, Fury of the Gods, number 2 would be Scream 6, number 3 would be Creed 3, number 4 would be 65, and number 5 would be Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and I got all 5 of my predictions right. Once again, obviously, though, this is a pretty easy one, because, I mean, it's literally just the one. Like I said last week, I didn't think Inside, starring Willem Dafoe, was gonna, cause too much damage. And look, it's not even in the top 10, And Everything Everywhere All at Once won Best Picture. And there was some news like, oh, it's back in theaters and some people are seeing it. But that didn't even crack the top 10. Number 11, though. So there is that at least. Anyways, let's move on to what actually happened, because it is, even though it's a boring, prediction weekend, oh, it's the obvious one that's going to get the top 5, it's still very interesting, because number 1 was indeed Shazam, Fury of the Gods. The first movie... Okay. So the first movie opened around $50 million, and it was like, okay, that's a pretty, modest opening for a movie that, didn't cost a whole lot. The budget was I believe somewhere to 80 million, somewhere like that. It wasn't really an expensive movie. Compared to a lot of these other, comic book movies that come and go. And this movie also doesn't cost a lot, especially for a sequel. David F. Sandberg lists it as $100 million, and then Wikipedia has a source that says it's 125. So we'll, just for the sake of, safety, always go with the biggest number just in case. Around a budget of 125 million, that's not, significantly bigger than the last one. It's a little more, but it's not a whole lot. And this movie was already tracking pretty low, but it was kind of okay, well, if they can squeak by, maybe word of mouth can help. But if you, even though Cinema Score gave it a B+, Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is high, critic score in the 50s. So not really great. And the opening weekend, went a little bit below projections as well, unfortunately. As I said, the first movie opened around 50 million. For a sequel to a movie that was pretty popular, you would think higher. No, lower. $30 million opening weekend. Now, this is 23 million below the first movie's opening weekend. Worldwide, even, it opened with $65 million, so not even cracking 100 million. If they were able to do that, I think some people might be just a tad bit more optimistic about the future of, not really DC, because we know it's going to get a reset, but just specifically the future of these characters. But I think even more specific than that, the actors that have been playing them for the past 2 movies, the past 4 years. So, it's unfortunately not looking very good. It needs 110 million domestically to outgross the first movie. Worldwide, it needs 298 million. Now, if it somehow manages to, have great staying power, can pick up speed in the next couple weekends, then, we can forget all of this dreary stuff we're talking now. But right now, it looks very bad, and considering John Wick is next weekend, and then soon after that it's Dungeons and Dragons, and then the Mario movie, it's maybe Shazam might have staying power because you have all these, juggernaut blockbusters coming out that people are excited for. Dungeons and Dragons is getting great reviews, and the Mario movie, no matter what, the projections are already in the 100 million, so, those movies are gonna, slam dunk, you know what I mean? So maybe there's a chance that some people will be well, let's give Shazam a shot since we've, the showing is sold out, we're here already, Shazam's empty. I don't know. That stuff, tends to happen sometimes. So I just don't think it would be enough to really get us over the finish line. I think the message is kind of clear. Maybe announcing, exactly what the plan is to reset everything and kind of acting yeah, it's kind of on its own anyways, and trying to use that as a selling point maybe wasn't great. It didn't work in their favor. I'm not trying to make it seem Snyder Bros, restore the Snyderverse people, really affected the box office. I truly believe, and leave your comments, but I truly believe that, that percentage of fandom is not that large. Maybe, we could, instead of gathering them in a football stadium, we could get a majority of them in a convention center, one room in a convention center. That's not it's not the biggest, it's not the biggest room in the convention center. It's one of the smaller ones, and it maybe doesn't even fill the entire room. There's a couple straggler seats in the back. So I don't think that's what's negatively affecting the box office. I think, marketing, I saw the trailer in front of a couple other movies with my parents, and every single time they saw the trailer, they were not impressed. And I can only imagine, I even, before I saw, what was it? Before I saw Tar randomly enough, there was like a pair sitting a couple rows behind me. They play the Shazam trailer and they're like, I'm not seeing that. So it's like maybe, the corny kind of humor side of it, even though that's a plus for me and it's kind of the selling point for what this character is, maybe that doesn't make for the best marketing, oddly enough. So maybe that has a lot to do with it, but, it could also do with the fact, the Snyder people do make up some of this, but I think it might have a little bit more to do with that. I think it also might have to do, I think the Zachary Levi backlash, if you want to look into that, you can make your own opinions. I'm not going to dwell on it here too much, but there is like a slight bit of backlash, I think more so just with like his Twitter usage. You can look into that. That's like a smaller percent. I think it just comes down to some people just weren't impressed with the marketing. Black Adam had just come and went immediately. Some people were not impressed with Black Adam. And that movie has conflicting reports on whether it was profitable or not, whether people actually have an interest in seeing more of that and going to see it multiple times in theaters. So Shazam 2 coming off of the back of that, and then you have the reboot news like, oh, don't worry about that because the big event is The Flash, and that's gonna reset things and we're gonna do new stuff. So yeah, it's a whirlwind of conflicting things that maybe led to this, and it's a bummer. I'm always rooting for David F. Sandberg, and I like the movie. I don't think it's as good as the first movie, but I think it's fine, and I do think the Rotten Tomatoes score must have hurt it just a little bit. And I can understand where some critics are coming from. I just, the 50% just seems a little bit more harsh than what this movie kind of needs. And that's kind of a bigger problem with like, when people just look at the score and not, acknowledging like, in this score, there's like a ton of different reviewers, and some of them might just, instead of saying like it's awful, some people might just be landing in the middle, you know what I mean? And that technically counts as a negative, I don't know, man. It's kind of wild. I should get back to some of these other stats. As far as DC, the films that they've released in this specific series, it still needs 16 million to outgross Wonder Woman 1984. At least they'll do that. Worldwide, it needs 101 million to outgross Wonder Woman 1984. It's probably going to do that. As far as David F. Sandberg's filmography, it is $5 million below the opening of Annabelle Creation, but it's $9 million above the opening for Lights Out, so it's not the lowest opening weekend he's ever had. It's his second lowest opening weekend. Obviously, the first Shazam had a higher one. It needs $37 million until it outgrosses Lights Out domestically. I think, it will at least do that, and worldwide it needs $83 million to outgross Lights Out. So I think Lights Out, and a safe bet, it will outgross Lights Out, maybe Annabelle Creation. Funny enough, I didn't look at the full Annabelle Creation stats, and I don't remember when I covered that film in 2017 on the show. Oddly enough, I don't remember that. So, we'll just have to wait and see if we get to talk about it in this series. But yeah, right now it's just looking like it's not going to outgross that first movie, and I think that probably would have been the thing. Or maybe it didn't need to outgross it, but if it could have at least just like break even, double its budget, have a strong opening, then maybe there'd be some talks of like, how can we preserve the character and the actors and all this, and I don't know, this stuff just might be thrown away, and that's sad. I think David F. Sandberg is obviously going to be fine. There was like some like kind of announcements recently where he's doing some new original horror film, or like he's doing it for Netflix or something like that. So I think he will always be okay. But so I don't think this right now flopping is doing any damage, but it is still a bummer because I'm always rooting for this guy. I always look up to him. So, I just hope he knows that a lot of people enjoyed it, including myself. I thought it was pretty solid, but let's move on. Let's move on away from this depressing topic. The longer we talk about DC, who knows how many more people join in the comments and start a fucking war, Number 2 was Scream 6. Obviously, this one dropped significantly from its, $40 million opening, but that's to be expected because Shazam is now out. And, considering Shazam didn't do all that well, maybe next weekend it might have a chance to overtake it. You know what I mean? And stay around a little longer when John Wick reigns at the top. But this weekend it made 17 million, adding to a domestic total of 76 million. It's 5 million away until it outgrosses Scream 5, so good on you there. Worldwide, it is sitting at 116 million, so that means it is 20 million over Scream 4's worldwide run, and now it needs 22 million until it outgrosses Scream 5. I think we'll be seeing it overtake that film next weekend for sure. There's no like, but it's just for sure gonna happen. We just gotta wait until then. So that's pretty exciting to say the least. Oddly enough, I don't really have much more to add to this, which is weird. I did like this movie, and you'd think it's only its second weekend here, I would have a bit more to say, but I kind of don't, you know what I mean? Shazam kind of took the wind out of me, I think. But I think even outside of that, it's kind of like, Yeah, I kind of already covered it. It's still outgrossing some of these, the domestic and worldwide runs, so it's not at the top of the Scream grosser list yet, so we'll just have to wait and see for that one. Let's move on to number 3, which is a lot more exciting for a franchise doing well. Creed 3. This movie made $15 million domestically, adding to a domestic total of $127 million, so that is 18 million over the first Creed, 12 million over Creed 2, 2 million over Rocky 3, 10 million over the first Rocky, and it's a couple 100,000 over Rocky 4, which makes it domestically the highest grossing Rocky film. So just to give you that real quick, worldwide it is sitting at 224 million. That's quite a boost. It is 24 million over Rocky 2 and 11 million over Creed 2, and now it needs 1 million until it outgrosses the first movie, and then, some ways to go until it outgrosses one of the other sequels. So worldwide it still has a way to go until it becomes, the highest grossing Rocky Creed movie, of all time. We'll definitely be seeing that happen though, just not right now, but domestically it's already cleared it, and that's pretty amazing, to say the least. I don't know why I didn't expect this movie to make this kind of wave for whatever reason, but I mean, here we are, you know what I mean? It's technically, I know Rocky's not in it, but it technically does count as being part of the Rocky series. This being the highest grossing one is kind of amazing, and that's got to be something that Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors and, all the people involved must be really, really ecstatic about, because I know I would be. That's just fantastic. This movie comes and, it's kind of at a time, like 5 years after the second one, pandemic, some people are worried about sequels going to the box office now, even because sometimes they, maybe do fine, but then they drop off. This one, costing 75 million, obviously does not have the same stakes as some of these other ones, but still, that's pretty big, and if it flops, that's embarrassing. But this, just cleared the way and did better than not just every Rocky movie, but the Creed movies that came before it. That's pretty awesome, and since this is a good movie too, that, helps add to the celebration of this whole thing. Number 4, unfortunately, is not facing the same success. 65, making $5 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of 22 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at 38 million, so still 7 million until it outgrosses the initial production budget of 45 million, but it is still nowhere near doubling it. Big bummer. So, on the one hand, at least not Shazam, but Scream 6 and Creed 3, that's like, a part of a franchise, but the movies are actually good and they're well made and there's something interesting about them, and you constantly want to go back to them and analyze them, talk about it. It's not like Ant-Man and the Wasp where it's just kind of like it's here, but I kind of just have to see it, but it wasn't really all that good, but I guess it's important maybe. And Creed 3 and Scream 6 are kind of the opposite, where it's like, actually this is, for the fans and other people who are just interested in seeing good movies, they really like this. The consensus is these are good, and they're being rewarded with, these great incomes, and their budgets are modest. And then you have 65, which is an original idea though, and it's got a pretty modest budget considering it's, prehistoric Earth and dinosaurs running amok and Adam Driver's a star. 45 million's, pretty solid. And I think maybe if 65 came out at a different time, and I think especially if they pumped more into the, meme potential of marketing Adam Driver versus dinosaurs, because for me, looking at the marketing, it just seemed like they relied solely on that initial trailer, but didn't really follow it up. Like Mithrigan had, that trailer, and then Mithrigan's showed up like in New York City and the dance went viral on TikTok. Like Cocaine Bear, kind of had a similar thing. Like you release the trailer and it's just wild, and then you follow that up more with some of the meme marketing. Smile as well, people smiling in baseball stadiums. And this movie just had that initial trailer and nothing else to back it up. So bit of a bummer that, this original, because I'm always rooting for the original idea, whether I like the movies or not. And, 65 was all right. But it is still a bummer that this couldn't, show like, hey, these original ideas, these action sci-fi ones can still do really well. And maybe there's one that'll prove that later down the line. Right now, it's just looking like horror movies are clearly dominating as far as like the original ideas go. Number 5 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, making $4 million, adding to a domestic total of $205 million. 1 million away from outgrossing Thor: The Dark World. I feel like it's been behind Thor 2 for a while now, oddly enough. Worldwide, it is sitting at 462 million, so it has outgrossed the first Thor by 13 million, and in the MCU lineup, it is now behind the first Ant-Man worldwide, so it needs 56 million to get there. Maybe it has a chance of scrounging that money, but it definitely doesn't have a chance of outgrossing Ant-Man and the Wasp worldwide right now. That's, domestically is like, that's like a, maybe, maybe not. And worldwide, it's like definitely not. So, bummer, bummer. I mean, at the very, it's like 38 million away worldwide from getting to the $500 million point. So, maybe they're looking at that as like a measure of success, even if it's not, immediately outgrossing the other Ant-Man movies. But still, it's like, this is just a big bummer, I'm assuming, for everyone involved. At least they doubled the, listed budget that they gave us. But, as I always say on the show, my rule is, for a lot of these bigger ones, there's always reports surrounding like these bigger movies mostly where they're always like, especially when it looks like they might be flopping, this movie needs to make, X amount of money actually, the budget's actually a little bit larger. So yeah, I'm sure they definitely expected more, especially since they tried to promote this as like the big event Ant-Man movie. That's what Peyton Reed wanted to do. He wanted to do the big stakes one and not the palate cleanser. There you go. Number 6 is Cocaine Bear, making $3.8 million, adding to a domestic total of $58 million. For Elizabeth Banks, it's still $126 million behind Pitch Perfect 2. Worldwide, it is sitting at $74 million, so it's finally doubled the $35 million budget listed on Wikipedia. So $4 million over that. That's pretty good, to say the least. I think, especially after the first strong opening, there was a part of me that was hoping that it wouldn't like start to drop as quickly, and it's held on pretty solidly, but I think I was hoping for like a Smile or Methregan where it's like it can last a while, you know what I mean? It can hold over, it can overtake Ant-Man, and it so far in the box office, despite the fact that they're very close right now, it is yet to overtake Ant-Man, on the chart, you know what I mean? Like it's not above Ant-Man in any way, shape, or form. And it's only just now doubled its budget, and I feel like maybe if this movie, was received a little better. Not that, obviously there have been some pretty good reviews for it. Some people were entertained by it, but, it's kind of like the last time I checked Rotten Tomatoes, the RT score is like 69, and I feel like maybe if it was a little bit more of a glowing response, because there's definitely been some like people that I've seen, and I thought the movie was decent, I enjoyed it, but it, I didn't love it. Some people came out like the initial reactions like, oh my gosh, it's so much fun, I really love it. And then there's some people who are like, this is actually pretty lame. And I think maybe if the response was a little bit better, it would have tripled that budget by now, which would be 105 million. But it has finally outgrossed Charlie's Angels in the Elizabeth Banks filmography by 1 million, so who cares? This movie has made more money than Elizabeth Banks' Charlie's Angels film. It's still $213 million behind Pitch Perfect 2 worldwide, but at least outgrossed the terrible Charlie's Angels movie. Am I right, everybody? We're good. Moving on to number 7, which is Jesus Revolution, making $3.5 million, adding to a domestic total of $45 million. So it's tripled its $15 million budget at this point. So good on you, Jesus. Not so good for number 8 though, which is just to skim right over this movie. Not so good for number 8 though, which is Champions. And I remember, last weekend I was like, man, I'm glad I waited till Monday, even though it was Oscars, I was going to wait anyways, but I'm glad I waited because Champions overtook Jesus Revolution, and that's pretty cool to see. And Champions now is below Jesus Revolution, and it's not even really close. It's close, but it's not really close, where tomorrow it could be like instantly flipped. It's like, nah, I think it's just going to stay here, making $3.03 million. This adds to a domestic total of $10 million. Worldwide, there's some worldwide total, but just to $12 million, and I still don't know what the budget of this thing is, which I assume is a little bit higher than your average, like, kind of low budget comedy film. So womp womp, to say the least. Let's move on to number 9, which, makes number 8 look worse, as far as like, the financial reports go, but this movie would make any movie look worse. Number 9, of course, is Avatar: The Way of Water, clinging on to dear life to remain in the top 10, and it might, also stick around next weekend too, just considering how popular this thing is. It made $1.9 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $678 million. That's $107 million behind the original film, $40 million until Top Gun Maverick for the 2022 domestic runs list, but it has outgrossed Avengers: Infinity War by a couple 100,000, so it is now the number 7 highest grossing domestic runs of all time, and now needs $22 million until it outgrosses Black Panther's number 6 spot. That's not going to happen, but it made it to number 7, and that's pretty great, all in all. Worldwide, it is sitting at $2,291,000,000. That's 632 behind the original, and 503 million behind Avengers Endgame's number 2 spot in the all-time worldwide runs list. It's not going to get there for either, unless some re-releases help down the line, but we're not in that time right now. But still, this movie has done incredible. I don't need to keep talking about this. Let's close out the video with number 10, which is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, making $1.5 million, adding to a domestic total of $182 million. This is outgrossing Madagascar Escape to Africa by $2 million, and is now behind The Croods by $5 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $470 million, which places it $21 million behind the first Shrek, and $84 million behind the first Puss in Boots movie. So we're kind of ending it, like, domestically it overtook another one. Worldwide, though, we're not ending on a high note of, like, it finally, outgrossed the first movie, it outgrows Shrek, and, that's amazing. It's like, no, like, it's where it is. That's still pretty amazing considering this movie opened, and I was, like, making a video going, like, maybe there's staying power, maybe holiday season, but goddamn, this is so depressing. And then, it had great staying power, great legs, but then, oh no, they released it on digital too early, oh no, is this gonna ruin it? And then it didn't. This movie is the movie that could. This really, some people compared it to it, but it truly is, like, the greatest showman for 2022, 2023, December, January. So there you go. This is great to see, to say the least. Like, and similar to Avatar, even, like, I don't know if it's going to be here next weekend, because you don't know if this could outtake Champions again. But that being said, considering this movie is as popular and held on for as long as it did, you don't know that for sure either. You know what I mean? You can't say, like, well, Champions will stick around longer. Like, what if Champions just drops off the map and it's like, well, Avatar can still stay here, Puss in Boots can still stay here, So there you go. That's great to see. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I'm going with John Wick Chapter 4. Number 2, I'm going with Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Number 3, Scream 6. Number 4, Creed 3. And then number 5, maybe a bit risky, but considering 65 had such a low amount this weekend, I'm going to go with A Good Person. Maybe just because it's a Florence Pugh movie and Morgan Freeman, some people recognize him, he's got some kind of name, and it's like a, drama, some layers of comedy, a real classic movie. Maybe this will do well enough to get into the top 5. We shall see. Anyways, what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below. And if you got your predictions right for this week, you're going to get a shout out right now. Unless you didn't get it right, then I am sorry. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.